You clearly need tax knowledge to work as a tax advisor, but what are the key benefits of having exceptional technical knowledge, skills, and ability, and why should you aim to have this yourself? That's what I'll share with you in this episode, and hopefully I inspire you or someone you know to take their technical skills to the next level. You're listening to the Tax Professionals Podcast, the podcast that helps tax professionals with their tax careers.
Welcome to the Tax Professionals Podcast, the podcast dedicated to helping you improve your tax career. Here's your host, Jack Bonehill.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode. I'm going to start this episode today by telling you a story about a client experience that I had where I was trying to use tax technical to get a unique but highly positive result for a client. I'll then move on to talking about the benefits of having exceptional tax knowledge, skills and ability, and why you should aim to have this yourself. If you've been a listener for some time now, you'll know what an advocate I am for technical. I'm not an advocate for this at the expense of being practical and commercial for a client. You need that too, but I am an advocate for it being an essential part of your skill set, as I believe it means that you can achieve better results for your clients. Hopefully, I'll convince you to agree with this statement by the end of this episode. If you would like to improve the technical ability of those in your team, then you should consider enrolling them in the Tax Research Masterclass that I'll be delivering in May this year. It'll teach them how to find and use relevant tax guidance, tax legislation, and case law, or for real situations that they encounter at work. They'll feel less daunted when encountering this, more confident that they know what they are doing, and they'll be able to get to the right answers. It'll mean you and other senior people in your team can delegate research work, knowing that it will save you time, stress, and better spread the workload across the team. For more details, go to thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/masterclasses or send me a message either by email or LinkedIn, or we can set up a chat if you'd like to have this. My email is jack@thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com, and my LinkedIn is Jack Bonehill. Search for that name and you should find me easily. Both of these contact methods are detailed in the show notes for this episode at thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/TTPP113. Also, in the show notes you can find rough timings for each section of this episode. Anyway, without further ado, let's get to the story and to the rest of the episode. I'm on a Teams meeting, and it's one of those meetings that I've been nervous to attend. I'm on this meeting with two established lawyers, both of whom who are partners. One is an employment lawyer partner, and the other is a tax lawyer partner. I'm on this meeting because I'm representing my client, who is actually an ex-employee of the lawyer's client. And my client is in the process of agreeing a settlement agreement with their ex-employer, where they will get a pretty large payment from their ex-employer. It'll be a payment of around £1 million. And my client wants to make sure that this payment is as tax efficient as it can possibly be, so as little tax paid on it as is possible. Prior to this meeting, I spent days of my time looking into the relevant tax rules for this situation, which is tax rules on termination payments. I looked through lots of case law, I looked through lots of guidance, tax legislation, and I actually read an entire book on the taxation of termination payments, which is a book that was hundreds of pages long, and I basically read that book from back to front. I know the tax rules on termination payments extremely well at this point. And prior to this meeting, I had used all of that technical knowledge, technical information that I had accumulated, and I used it to establish what I thought was the best way of structuring this settlement agreement to get the best tax outcome for my client in a way that is entirely legitimate, of course. One of the first things that this employment lawyer says on this call is they say that they've never seen anything like this and the report is fanciful. It's not normal. Basically, this employment lawyer has not got anything nice to say about this report at all. But because it is backed by technical justification, I want to enter into a technical debate with the tax partner that's on this call. And so I attempt to do that, and I don't get anything back apart from it's not normal, and they've not seen anything like this before. And it becomes apparent to me really quickly that this tax partner actually has no clue about the tax rules on termination payments, like none at all. He doesn't understand any of it, which is just entirely frustrating. They may as well have brought on a bricklayer or a plumber or a newborn baby at this point, because they would have offered better technical input, or at least no worse technical input, than this tax partner. And at this point, I've read this entire book on termination payments, so I know these rules really well. But nonetheless, because both these lawyers are acting this way and saying these things, it's making me start to doubt myself a bit and making me start to think that actually what I'm talking about here is absolute rubbish. I get off this Teams meeting feeling a mix of annoyed and deflated. Feeling annoyed because I've spent all this time doing this research and compiling this report for my clients to get what I believe is the right answer and a good outcome for my client. And annoyed because there was just no technical debate or discussion at all on this call. They just completely shut me out. I'm feeling deflated because now I'm starting to think that minimising the tax that my client will pay on this settlement agreement of around £1 million is not going to be minimised. The most likely way that I'm going to get this refund for my clients is if I can convince the ex-employer to process these payments without taxing them. But after that meeting with those lawyers, I just cannot see how I'm ever going to do that at this point. They seem so adamant that I'm doing something dodgy and being a charlatan here. So I could just not see me getting them on board with processing the payments without taxing them. The only other route that we have available to us is if the ex-employer does tax the payments and we disagree with the amount that they've taxed and paid, the only route that we have to get that tax back is to actually get the money from HMRC via self-assessment. And with such large numbers involved, potentially hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of tax, I just think it's going to be really difficult and really unlikely to get HMRC to process that refund. One, that would be difficult whenever they're processing such a refund. And two, we are actually technically dealing with a subjective area of tax here. And there are arguments on both sides of the scale. So at this point, the chances of getting that refund just feel small to none. But it's going to be as close to zero as possible unless we can get the settlement agreement contract to have some particular wording in that we can use to our advantage when trying to get this refund from HMRC. And so what I really needed in the contract settlement agreement is something that says the payments are for these things, this amount relates to X, this amount relates to Y, and then I can use that to justify the refund to HMRC. Unfortunately, the lawyers do not agree to that, but we end up getting to a position where the contract says the payment is made up of these things, just without the numbers allocated to the different buckets. It's half a win, and it gives me something to work with to get a refund from HMRC. I spent some time over the next few weeks compiling a white space disclosure to go into the self-assessment return of my client to explain why on their self-assessment return there's a lower amount of taxable employment income than what is being reported by their employer. And I also draft a report to enclose with the self-assessment, which explains all the technical backing, explains how we've reached a number that's taxable and that isn't taxable, and justifies the refund amount that we are now going to try to get. And my client gets their accountant to submit their self-assessment return for them. We're filling in the white space as with the wording that I provided and with the report that I created for them to send with the self-assessment return. And because my client wants to get their refund as soon as possible, they submit their tax return pretty much like straight after the tax year end, so very early in April. It gets to the 21st of May and I'm in my home office just working that day as usual. But I see that I've got a missed call from this client and then 2 texts saying they have news, can you give me a call? So it's only like 4 weeks or so after their self-assessment has been submitted. I just cannot see that they've got a refund this soon. What's more likely, I think, is that HMRC has come back and ask questions and potentially even started an inquiry, which is something that the client knew was a possibility. Anyway, I call the client back and they answer. And they start off by saying, Mr. Bonehill, which is quite a formal way to address me after we've worked together so closely for so long, which makes me think that maybe this isn't good news. They then proceed to say, you effing, and there's not usually many good things that follow the word effing, and so it's kind of reconfirming to me that this isn't good news. And then they follow with the word genius. They say, Mr. Bonehill, you effing genius, and they proceed to tell me that they've had an amount of money paid to them by HMRC for a number of around £200,000. And I just cannot believe it, like genuinely so. I thought it was possible to get the refund, but I didn't think it would be so quick and so easy. I thought it'd be a massive battle. But the second that they tell me all of this, my body just fills with elation and I just feel so chuffed and so happy that it's come to this. If I was in front of those two lawyers at this second, I'd probably be celebrating around the room in front of them after they made me feel like I was just some dodgy tax advisor and I had no idea what I was talking about, when in fact, they're the ones that had no idea what they're talking about. And if it wasn't for all of that technical work that I did and the amount of effort that I put into making sure that all that work was completely technically solid, if it wasn't for that, there's just no way that this refund just wouldn't have even been possible. So on the basis of a really strong piece of technical work, a client has got a circa 200k refund. So that's the story then, or entirely true based on a client experience I had. And it was actually probably my proudest kind of moment as a tax advisor to date, because it was like a unique set of circumstances, a unique but really good result, and one that I was just like super chuffed for when the client told me that the refund had been processed. There was a lot of work that went into this project, as you can probably imagine. There was two main parts, I suppose. One, which was the facts finding bit, to properly understand all the background facts, etc., which is something that my colleague did for me. They went through a bunch of paperwork, which actually included a tribunal claim, an employment tribunal claim that our client had made against the ex-employer. So they gathered all the facts for me. I did the main bulk of the research. I came across the book, the Taxation of Termination Payments book by Bloomsbury, which seemed completely ideal for the situation that we had here. And the reason I went to a book that was so specialist and I suppose so in detail was because I felt like we really needed to go back to basics, because I knew it was a subjective area of tax, and I knew I needed to know it I knew I needed to know the ins and outs of it really to work with those rules and to even start to get a good position for the client in terms of restructuring, or in terms of structuring the termination package, the settlement agreement package, so that some elements of it were taxable and some elements of it weren't. So I did the main bulk of that. I also looked in the legislation, I looked in guidance. My colleague actually did the main bulk of the case law research for me, and I looked at the ones that I thought were relevant afterwards, and they did a really good job of that. And then we brought it all together, so we had like all the facts, all the tax rules, and then what I needed to do was essentially figure out how we could use that to, I suppose, have a settlement agreement where there's payments where less tax was due than £450,000 worth of tax, and that was pretty much the crux of the project. But it really wouldn't have been possible without the technical elements of it. It wouldn't have been possible without, I suppose, presenting the technical argument to HMRC in a really, I suppose, strong way too, in a way where they really couldn't disagree with it. So there was that side of the coin too, but really the work wouldn't have been possible without the technical element, which is why I think it's such a great story for this episode. To get us all on the same page, I just want to explain what I actually mean when I'm talking about tax technical knowledge, ability, and skills. So it's pretty much, well, it is everything that relates to technical for tax. So that is your knowledge of the tax rules. So, what you actually know off the top of your head, including awareness and what you know about tax rules. The skills bit for me is all about being able to do tax research, find the relevant information, whether it's guidance, legislation, or case law, being able to understand it, interpret it, then to apply it to the situation that you have and make conclusions, and then also be able to write it up so that you can see the arguments in a very clear and concise way. So hopefully at this point, without me spelling out all these benefits, or the key benefits anyway, of having exceptional tax technical knowledge, ability, and skills, hopefully the story's given you a good idea about why it's beneficial to have this. So I've got 5 or so listed down here that I'll just briefly run through and also link back to the story at hand. So the first benefit I'm going to mention is that it can help you to, or allow you to, achieve results for clients that they and others might not think is actually possible, like some planning options or options to reduce tax, like in this situation I had here with the story that I just told, because those 2 lawyers did not think that what I was talking about was possible. They just thought I was speaking rubbish, essentially. And actually, the lawyers of my client, they actually didn't believe me at first either. They also thought I was talking nonsense. So actually, by having really good technical knowledge, ability, and skills, you can achieve results and think of possibilities that others might not even know is possible, and therefore achieve really good results for your clients. So the second benefit I've got down here is that it allows you to give better advice to your clients than you would be able to without it, because if you know more about the tax rules and you can use them in a way that helps your clients more than other people can, then you're going to get better results for them than what other people can achieve for them. And if you can achieve really good results for them, it's going to allow you to build strong relationships with that client. It's going to increase the chances of repeat business, and actually it's going to increase the chance of them referring you into other people too. So in this case, with this story, the client in particular, actually, every time they have a tax issue, even if it's not employment tax related, they come to me first and ask if I know of anyone that can help with this if I can't. And they also put me in contact with about 3 or 4 of their contacts on the back of this piece of work, because they were so impressed with the work that had happened and were so chuffed with the result. The third benefit that I've noted down here is that it can allow you to be able to defend your clients during HMRC disputes or disagreements by establishing and presenting arguments to protect your clients and to say to HMRC that their position is wrong, essentially. In most inquiries of HMRC, there's probably going to be an element where HMRC has got a chance to disagree with a position that your client's taken. So even if HMRC is saying their position, which is a fairly standard position, if you can establish a different argument and put that point across well enough, then you can deter HMRC from potentially going after a liability of your client, or even issuing a penalty or interest and all those things. The fourth benefit that I've got down is that it will allow you to be flexible with your tax knowledge. And what I mean by this is that, let's say that you know how to deal with scenario X, which is, I don't know, company leases company cars and their staff use them for private use. So that's a very standard situation, right? And pretty much everyone that's done ATT and CTA will know that there's a taxable car benefit there that needs reporting to HMRC on a P11D. Now, if those facts were changed very slightly, let's say, I don't know, that the cars weren't leased, but they were, I don't know, purchased. If you don't have really good technical ability and knowledge, you might not know whether or not there's a company car in that situation. You probably would in that one, to be fair, because it's still fairly standard, but there are facts that could be different, unusual, where you look at them and you go, I do not know what the tax answer to that is. Well, if you've got exceptional tax knowledge, ability, and skills, then you can figure out the answer, whether it's by undertaking research, whether it's using the information that you know and applying it to the circumstances. So it will allow you to deal with more situations than you could have done, and do so confidently if you didn't have exceptional technical skills. I suppose the final one really is that it does make it so much easier to provide good client advice and client service, because if you can use the tax rules to their advantage in more flexible ways and more creative ways than, say, some other advisors will, then you're going to help solve their problems in a way that's more likely to be ideal for them. So a lot of times when we're giving advice, we can give it from our tax ivory tower, but it might not work commercially for them, it might not work practically for them. And if you have really good technical knowledge, ability, and skills, then you can work with that better to come up with a better solution that works in their circumstances. So those are really the 5 key benefits that I thought of as part of this episode. Clearly, there are more, and some of these are somewhat interlinked with each other. but overall, there's a lot of benefits of having really good technical knowledge, ability, and skills. So why should you aim to have exceptional tax technical knowledge, ability, and skills? Well, it's, I suppose, simply so that you can take advantage of those benefits of having it. If you want to truly be an excellent tax advisor, then personally I would say it's essential, because it can help you to, it allows you to maximize the help that you can give to your clients and help them in the most beneficial way possible to them as a client. I just want to clarify that when I'm talking about being a really solid, excellent tax advisor, I'm not talking about like other aspects that us as tax professionals might need to be good at for certain roles. For example, if we want to be a tax partner, then we need to be good at winning work, building and growing a team, and other things too. And when I'm talking about being a truly excellent tax advisor, I'm kind of ignoring those things, because those to me are not part of being an excellent tax advisor. They're part of being a more well-rounded tax professional, and are clearly important in other areas, but they don't make you give any better tax advice to your clients. So that's what I'm talking about when I mean a truly excellent tax advisor. I really mean just the bit that relates to giving tax advice and helping your clients out, rather than all the other things that surround us as tax professionals in the current world. I'd also say though, actually, that I actually think that the technical core, the solid technical core, is a stepping stone to help you get to those more senior tax roles like a partner or heads of tax, and then you can more easily build upon those other skills later on. Because I think in a lot of cases, I think it's fair to say that technical becomes less important in those more senior roles, because you will usually have a team around you to deal with those things instead of you having to do it, and you'll have to focus on other things instead. But in the way that accountancy firms work in particular, like you really do need to go through like the motions of being good at certain things before you can get to a certain grade. And if you've got really solid technical ability, really excellent technical ability, then I think it makes all the other things much easier, and it makes you easier to progress, to develop, and to become promoted. And I suppose ultimately, like if you're someone that wants to do really good by your clients and give them a really good service and really help them as much as you can, if you don't have really solid technical ability, skills, knowledge, all those things, then you can end up missing ways that could help your clients, which will just make your advice more substandard. And for me, like I always worry about that, because I want to make sure that I'm giving them the best advice that I can possibly give them, and I've thought of like everything that we can do to help them, essentially. Which I know some of you might think is a little bit overkill. It's the way that I've always operated though, and I'm sure there's at least some of you who listen that feel the same too. So that's actually it for this episode. I hope that you have enjoyed the story, and that I've inspired at least some of you to take your technical ability, skills, and knowledge to the next level. The Tax Research Masterclass is there for you and your team to help you become solid technically, and to allow you to start reaping the benefits that I've talked about in this episode. If you think it would be of potential interest to you or to your tax staff in your immediate team or wider firm, please do reach out and let's have a chat to see how I can help you. My contact details are in the show notes at thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/TTPP113, but you can use my email, jack@thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com, or you can search for me, Jack Bonehill, on LinkedIn. The show notes for this episode include the links and contact details mentioned throughout this episode, and they also include a link for where you can register for a month free trial of Corona Eyes online tax resources. These resources are my go-to resources whenever I'm doing tax research, and they have been now for about 8 years. I rate them really highly. If you enjoyed the episode, you can subscribe for email notifications of all future episodes by heading on over to thetaxprofessionalpodcast.com/subscribe. Emails are bi-weekly and are released on Mondays. But that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed the episode and have taken away some useful points to help you to progress, develop, and improve your tax career. Until next time.